What's going on, everybody? Today we are going to recap the first quarter of the Steelers season, one in which they are 3-1 and on top of the AFC North. This is something I've been planning to do over the last week or so. Going to be a little bit of a different style of video than what I typically produce on here. This is more podcasty, if you will. But as I try to come up with new ideas to keep the content fresh on the channel, I'd love to hear feedback from you guys in the comments, whether you like this style video, you want more of it, or if it's just not your vibe, let me know. Today's agenda is going to be kind of split into three different segments, all of which I'm excited to talk about. I'm going to go over what I've been most encouraged by and what I'm most concerned about on both of the sides of the ball. So we're going to talk offensive defense. We're going to talk some stock up, stock down, some players and some coaches that are exceeding or maybe not meeting expectations thus far through the first month of the season. And then I'm going to get into some of your all's questions from Twitter. I posted a mailbag for the Steelers Now article that I do every month. Wasn't able to obviously get to all of them because you all are so awesome and, hit me with 50 different questions. But I do want to get to some of the more pertinent questions that I think a lot of people on YouTube would be glad to hear about, interesting topics. So we're going to talk stuff about, Devontae Adams, that kind of trade saga unfolding in Vegas, Justin Fields, and then just some other comments about like the Steelers secondary and those types of things. So just before we get started, if you would, just please make sure that you like the video, subscribe, turn on notifications, all that great stuff. It's greatly appreciated on my end. It's just a free and easy way to support the channel. Like I said, I appreciate it, guys. So I want to start with the offense first. What I'm most excited about so far this season, I would say it's the play of Justin Fields, who's 13th in EPA per play right now and 17th in success rate. Look, Fields has not been necessarily perfect, but I think he's done the one thing that I was begging him to do, or Russ, to do this season, and that's provide the Steelers with competent quarterback play. That's really all I've been begging for over the past couple seasons, man. And I think so far that Justin's done that. I think that you've seen glimpses of Justin's strengths show up over the first month of the season. The deep ball accuracy, he's been highly, highly accurate when pushing the ball down the field over 20 yards. He's had some unfortunate luck with some big splash plays get called back due to penalty. You think back to that Atlanta game, and also like he had a scramble drill to George Pickens down the right sideline against Denver. Those plays just really unlucky, and his numbers could probably look a lot better if it weren't for those two plays. And I also think you've seen some incremental improvements in some other key areas. One that I want to talk about specifically, just negative play avoidance, not taking as many sacks. He's getting the ball out a little bit faster. But I think that those, like taking care of the ball, his turnover worthy play percentage is the lowest it's ever been. So those things are all encouraging to me. I think that he's slowly coming along in the quick game area of the passing game too. And I just think that the one thing that kind of I've seen specifically over the past 2 weeks is this just looks like a more confident quarterback than the one that I saw really at times in Chicago, especially as things kind of unraveled there. But what I'm really most excited about is I think that there are certain elements of Justin's game or the offense that haven't necessarily hit their ceiling yet, and there's room for improvement. I think the quarterback run game, we saw him get going a little bit last week against the Colts, and that's something that I definitely anticipate them leaning into. We're going to talk about that a lot on the preview for the Steelers-Cowboys game on Sunday Night Football. But that hasn't gotten going yet, and I don't think that most of that blame necessarily falls on Justin. I think there's been some errors up front that have caused some disruption. And I also think that, the scheme itself has not necessarily done what I would consider a great job putting him in a quarterback friendly environment. I think they've got issues on offense that he has actually showed that he can kind of overcome a little bit. And that's been encouraging to me because it's not always going to be perfect. And hopefully as the season goes on, the offensive line starts playing better. We'll see what the receiving talent looks like as the year progresses as well. Obviously the marriage between him and Arthur Smith hopefully develops. So I've just been encouraged. Like, I think he's been very solid. And it's never going to be perfect. Like, he has very defined strengths and weaknesses, some of which are always going to probably exist to some degree, but I've been encouraged by what I've seen so far. And that gives me some real optimism about where this offense is headed. I would say, like, what I'm most concerned about, this team can't really run the football right now. And the play action passing game really isn't able to kind of, like I said, create those easy splash plays. You just look at some of the numbers, man, and they're really ugly. 21.7% rushing success rate on first down. It's dead last in the NFL right now. It's a stat that I've harped on all week. They just have not been able to run the ball on early downs and keep themselves ahead of the chains. penalties played a part in them getting behind the sticks in the first couple weeks. So they haven't been necessarily clean there, but I think their inability to run the football very effectively is a massive issue, and it's a concern for me right now. Especially, I think some of that can be related back to, the offensive line. They've unfortunately had a lot of injuries up there kind of pop up. They've had a rotation of guards playing. I think that some of their backups have kind of struggled, specifically Spencer Anderson, which is kind of expected when you put a seventh round pick in there. So the inability to run the football, when Arthur Smith was hired, Arthur likes to play a very specific brand of football. He likes to run the ball early in sequences. He wants to stay committed to the ground game and then kind of set up the play action stuff off of that. And the play action stuff is more so a concern that I don't know if it's personnel or what the issue is. I think it's a myriad of different things. But they've tried to take some shot plays off play action, and they just haven't worked, man. Like, you just look at some of the numbers: 5.2 yards per attempt off play action, not good enough. And then they're averaging one yard average depth of target off play action. So really, all their play action shots have been bootlegs, which are fine. Justin could do those things. They're necessary constraints for some of their outside zone stuff. But at the same time, they haven't been able to push the ball down the field and create anything really off of their play action stuff, which is a problem. That's one of the things that NFL defenses are just dead set on right now, is just keeping the ball in front, and play action is a way to open things up. And I just think from a design perspective, when I've been watching the film, a lot of their stuff that they've been trying to run off play action has just been well covered. I can only really think of one turn down from Justin to where I wanted him to like let the ball rip. And then, there's of course been some issues from a pass protection standpoint there too. But I think for the most part, defenses have really had a really nice beat on Smith's play action stuff, and that was something that I was excited about coming into the season. It just hasn't come to fruition yet, and I think if this offense is really going to get where they need to be, come second half of the season, in order for it to reach like its highest peak or potential, they need to get both of those things going. And I'm a little bit more optimistic that the run game will find its footing. Najee is typically a slow starter. I think getting Isaac Seumalo back in the lineup is going to help tremendously. I'm really bummed about James Daniels, but it does give them a chance to get an early look at Mason McCormick, who's probably going to be their starter at guard next year, or at least, if he plays well, he will be. So I'm optimistic that maybe the run game will eventually find its footing. The play action stuff is a little bit more concerning to me, just because I don't think that they've had great answers so far through the first month of the season. Kind of moving on to the defensive side of the ball, what I'm most excited about, this defensive line clicking on all cylinders. And Cam Hayward looks like a dominant player once again. I think, I speak for a lot of people in the fan base, just kind of curious about whether or not Hayward could still be a really productive pass rusher at his age, just because of the numbers. They've kind of dipped off in recent seasons, but man, he started off the season extremely strong. Not only playing against the run, he's still strong as an ox, holding the point at the point of attack, being able to stack and shed, still extremely, extremely strong and physical, man. But the stuff as a pass rusher has been really encouraging to me. Even last week against Quentin Nelson, who I think is one of the better guards in the National Football League, just being able to bull rush him. He had a really key rush late in the fourth quarter, I think on the last Colts drive, where he was able to register a sack, put them into 3rd and long. They punt 2 plays after. I've just been really encouraged by what I've seen by Cam. And I even think, Larry Ogunjobi had really nice moments against the Colts. And I think we kind of know what Larry is at this point. Like, there's going to be games where you're just not going to hear from him. He's an inconsistent and imperfect player. But at the same time, I think he's been perfectly fine this season, and had some really nice moments too where he's popped off on the film. And I think, the numbers necessarily haven't been there for Keanu Benton. The sack totals still really aren't like, there to the degree that I would necessarily like them to be, because I think he's a lot more talented than the box score indicates right now. But he is winning, and it's frustrating, because I know like people aren't going to necessarily pay as much attention, or he's not going to get as much recognition for those things, but he is winning. Like, he's winning against good quality centers. I think as a run defender, there are definitely times where he'll get blown off the ball, but I think he makes plays away from his gap. He makes plays in the backfield. And I just think he's a really solid player who's showing a lot of really nice progression in year 2. So what I'm most excited about is just the play of the defensive line. And then you couple that with, obviously what TJ Watt can do in their pass rush. I just think that they're going to have the ability and the talent level to overwhelm opposing offenses for the majority of the part of the season, which is kind of what I expected, obviously coming into the season. But what I'm most concerned about, What happens when the pass rush doesn't dominate, and when the quarterback competition gets kind of stiffens a little bit? I mentioned this in the film room for on the members only page. I went over some of the ways that Shane Steichen was able to attack the Steelers defense on Sunday. We went over some of the struggles in cover three and just you know reasons why he's had so much success against them in recent matchups. But having said that, it's not a formula that everybody can replicate because not everybody has Indy's offensive line. I think Steichen's a really good play caller, but certain offenses, as you get further into the schedule, and I think after a 3-1 start, I think a lot of Steelers fans, rightfully so, have playoff aspirations. So, what happens when opposing teams are going to be able to take their front four away and not let them completely wreck the game? Does the coaching aspect of this team have the capacity to scheme free rushers open? Do they have the capacity to pivot to being a little bit more versatile and more varied from the tendencies that they put on film? And I think that that's still a question that I have because I didn't see a ton of pivoting in that Colts game, which was, I think, part of the reason that led to the loss. Not trying to take anything away from Indy, but that's just one of my questions. I think that over the first part of the season, the quarterback play that they've gone up against has been lacking. Obviously, Herbert and Cousins. Herbert's a great quarterback, but he was very limited, and then didn't play the whole game. Cousins, I think, has looked like a shell of even what we've been used to seeing him in the past couple of years, just because like he's coming back from a serious injury. It was a slow start is fine, but Bo Nix, guys like Joe Flacco, like they're going to see better quarterbacks as the season goes on. So that's just something I'm wondering or curious about is like what this defense is going to look like schematically once the competition gets better. Um, but I wouldn't say necessarily anything like panic level or anything like that. I do want to talk about some stock up, stock down. So just to kind of preface my thoughts on this particular segment, when I say like stock up, stock down, I'm not necessarily saying like these are necessarily the best or the worst players on the team. I just think that these are guys that are, exceeding expectations, whether it be expectations from a general population, the fan base, etc., or just my expectations in general, or not meeting those expectations. So just want to kind of preface that. Not saying that these are necessarily the best three players on the team, but they've just been some of the players that I've really enjoyed watching. I think are playing some really good ball, and I want to talk about the reasons why that is. And first player I got to mention, man, rookie center Zach Frazier has been fantastic. Before the season began, I wrote for Steelers Now that I thought Frazier was going to be the most NFL ready player that they had in this draft class. That's absolutely been the case over the first month of the season. You know, it's kind of cool to see, but basically, all of his best traits as a prospect coming out of West Virginia, they've transferred over immediately. And I think that that's really rare in the case of a rookie offensive lineman. The NFL is really tough, man. We got a lot of really good defensive linemen in the NFL right now. And, for him to come in and play the way that he has been, extremely impressive, consistent. Like some of the things I just notes from like, over the last couple of weeks watching him on film, consistently playing with great leverage, proper hand placement, driving guys off the ball in the run game, play strength, finishing ability, two things that I highlighted when he was coming out of college. Those absolutely pop on tape. You check out the Chargers game, he was consistently burying people on the turf. And I think I love the fact that he's like looking for work in pass pro. His anchor has been more than sufficient against NFL caliber power rushers so far. Just 4 pressures, 2 quarterback hits across like 145, I think, pass blocking snaps so far. He's checking all the boxes in terms of the requisite quickness off the ball, in terms of reach blocks, getting to his landmarks, all those different things. It's really hard to find negative plays on his tape, aside from like maybe the occasional miss at the second level in space when he's climbing. The double team blocks for the Steelers run game have been very bad, and it's part of the reason why they haven't been able to run the ball effectively. But to me, he hasn't seemed like the primary issue with those. I think that has a lot to do with some of the guys that are playing around him right now. And, for this guy to come in, make the protection calls right away and perform this admirably with a rotation of guards playing next to him throughout the first month of the season it's freaking awesome, man. It really is. So I think there's a lot of good things to be said about Zach Frazier, not just where he's at right now, but where he could potentially be by the end of the season heading into next year. The Steelers have a good player on their hands, and I think that's it's comforting to be able to say that a month into someone's career. So, second player I want to talk about, Darnell Washington. Really heading into the season, man, we knew that Washington was going to see a lot more playing time in this offense just because of how multi-tight end oriented Arthur Smith's system is. You know, when Darnell came out of college, I said this on a podcast that I was on earlier this week. I think he was kind of more of an idea than he was an actual like player or anything else. A lot of his best plays, came out in space with him just kind of bullying smaller defenders. He was just so physically dominant that he was winning off those tools or traits or his build, his stature more than anything else. And like he was just overwhelming people in college. And it's reasonable to expect that he wouldn't be able to do that in the NFL. But what I have seen already so far this season is like I've seen a guy who's using better hand placement, better hat placement in the run game, which is allowing him to sustain blocks at a higher level later in the rep, which was sometimes an issue as a rookie. They're giving him some big boy assignments in pass pro. He's won one-on-one reps against guys like Matthew Judon, John Franklin Myers. And those things aren't necessarily things that a lot of tight ends are asked to do. Are capable of doing whatsoever, not just consistently, but ever. And the fact that they trust him to do those things is cool, and it opens up a lot of different things that you can do on offense. Of course, you have to mention the explosive play that he created against the Colts. They leak him out into the flat. He dribbles a defender's helmet off the ground, then he goes and hurdles somebody 20 yards down the field. For a guy who is probably like 6'7", 3 bills. It's just you just don't see that stuff, and I think it's pretty cool. We even saw kind of the back shoulder fade grab for the first touchdown of his career. I believe that was against the Broncos. So we've seen him. Only 4 catches on the season, but I think leverage is always going to be an issue. So he's going to have an ugly loss or two in the run game every single game. And I don't think that's ever going to change. And I don't necessarily think that he's ever going to be this high volume pass catcher because he does have some stiffness in terms of changing directions or him as a mover. But he's incredibly valuable, man. Just the things that he can do for you as a blocker, the one-on-one assignments, the way that he can create displacement along the line of scrimmage. He's become like what I really consider like one of the absolute coolest players in the NFL, and someone that he's appointment viewing for me. When I watch the film, I always find my eyes kind of gravitating towards the things that they're asking him to do. And it's been pretty cool. Like, I think that, don't be bothered by what the stat sheet says for Darnell Washington at the end of the season. Like, this is a very useful player. And speaking of useful players, man, Deshaun Elliott, like, this is a guy who I kind of came into the season thinking, oh, this is a useful piece. He's going to provide some stability at the strong safety spot. He's been that, and then everything else. I mean, this dude is playing phenomenal ball right now. He was a little bit of an afterthought, I felt like, in free agency, because of some of the splashier moves that the Steelers made early in free agency. You think back to the trade for Justin Fields, them signing Russell Wilson. They made the splash signing for Patrick Queen. And this guy was kind of a little bit of an afterthought, I think, for a lot of people. But he's having what really looks like the best month of his career, really. The underrated part of this addition was he's allowed Minka Fitzpatrick to play exclusively in the post this season, which was something that I think pretty much everyone was begging for. Everybody was wanting Minka out of the box, getting back in center field, all those things. But one thing I loved about Elliott's tape, like last year when I was looking at his film with the Dolphins, just his reliability as a tackler. And so far, those things have absolutely transferred over to the Steelers film. So far, 17 tackles, 0 misses. That's outstanding for a guy that's playing in the box on the majority of his snaps. Things that just pop out on film for me. Deshaun's a very intelligent player, always seems to be in the right spot, never out of position. His willingness to take on blocks, shoot gaps in the run game with 0 hesitation, and just plays with a ton of fire and physicality. I just really appreciate it. And he's made some splash plays too. He had the interception in the opener. He had the forced fumble on Richardson that they unfortunately couldn't recover last week. But there's just value in having what I would consider a pro's pro on defense. And for a guy with a relatively low cap hit, he's just offered tremendous return on investment so far. Like I said, I don't really have many negative things to say about him. The only catches that he's really allowed in coverage have been against like shiftier receivers like Josh Downs, which will probably give him some trouble just because that's not really his game, but it's something that he's going to be asked to do in this system. But I'm extremely happy with what I've seen so far with him. And this is a guy who, like I said, tremendous return on investment. I don't know what else you could really ask for out of him so far. So as far as stock down, like I said, I think a lot of people have asked me like kind of my thoughts about Patrick Queen. It seems like he's catching a lot of heat in the fan base right now with just like the early returns. Like I said, he was the splash signing of the offense. Admittedly, I think that this has been a slow start. I've kind of went on some different podcasts and kind of talked about this in some different forums so far, but I think he's done some fine things in coverage. But I think that there's definitely been a little bit more of an adjustment period to the system than what I would have anticipated or imagined. When playing the run right now, it seems like he's just playing things a little bit too slowly, like not really fully trusting his eyes or what he's seeing in front of him. I thought in the second half of the Colts game, or as that game wore on, he started to kind of be more physical at the point of attack, take on blocks, come downhill a little bit more. Did get him in trouble once where he shot into the wrong gap and it allowed Taylor to bust out front with a explosive play on his own run concept. But he just really got to start using his athleticism to his advantage again. I think, he's not ever going to be a stack and shed guy. And you just have to understand, like, he has a very specific way that he's going to play and how he wins. And a lot of that goes back to, like, him using his athletic gifts and playing with that physicality, the hit power, all those things that we saw in the Baltimore film. 21% missed tackle rate, mainly like 4 missed tackles in the opener. He missed a couple last week as well. That's obviously got to come down. He's always been a guy that's been a little loosey-goosey as a tackler just because of his play style. He's always a little bit, I think sometimes like those guys that play with a lot of speed, those rangy guys, they sometimes play a little bit out of control in space. And Queen can definitely be guilty of doing that. But I'm not too overly concerned by what I've seen so far. If, we get into another like 4-week period or we do one of these things at the midseason mark and we're still not seeing him make those splash plays, then I'll be more concerned. But I'm not ready to hit the full on panic button. This is a guy who I think just put together too much good film over the last 2 years for me to just jump ship too soon. But I will acknowledge that I do understand the panic, the concern from the fan base at the moment, just because he was their splash signing. You sign an off-ball linebacker. Off-ball linebacker is not a premium position. You want immediate returns. I completely understand that. He's got to play better, but I anticipate that he's going to. So not completely off the boat yet there. In terms of next like stock down player, I would say Broderick Jones. Another slow start for a guy that I think a lot of people were kind of expecting some significant things from. He's been tagged with 4 sacks already this season, a little over 3 games. Of course, they had him rotating in and out. With Fautanu in week 2. A couple of those I think could be like shared responsibility. Could the quarterback get the ball out a little quicker? Absolutely. Could he be expecting some help in some other areas? Sure. I think so too. But he's also had 2 other sacks that have been called back due to penalty. I don't think he's been a consistent difference maker as a blocker in the run game either. I thought the Indy game was the best that he's looked as a run blocker so far this season. So if you're looking for a silver lining, I think that is definitely a good thing. He had some really nice reps where he was denting people on the backside of down blocks, creating movement. So those are always good things. But I think that Broderick was always a guy that was a project. I think there's been very little technical improvement to his games. I think that his hands and feet are both still kind of a mess. And until we see some like tangible improvement in either of those areas, I think that this is going to continue to be a guy that's solely winning on like his physical tools and his physical gifts. And he's going to be at right tackle, presumably for the rest of the season. So it's going to be good exposure for him. We're going to get to see him hopefully grow as the season goes on. Like I said, I was probably a little bit lower on Broderick's rookie season than anyone else. And I would probably agree with the fact that I would have probably preferred to have him at left tackle and Troy at right tackle. Everything working out the way, we kind of intended to open the season. But I also want to acknowledge that like Dan Moore's outplayed him so far this season. And that just is what it is. Hopefully Broderick will play better, but this was always a draft pick that I kind of thought that, offered them a high ceiling, but also a low floor. So this is a guy who I want to kind of get into year 3 before we completely like write him off. Like I said, the Colts game was a little bit better as a run blocker, even though there were some issues in pass protection that I think still persists. So we'll see on Broderick. So the last stock down person, it's funny, I actually mentioned this a little bit today. This is a late addition to my show notes. I want to talk about Steelers wide receiver coach Zach Azzanni. So I am a little bit probably more hesitant than I think most fans are to criticize coaching in certain moments. But when things routinely pop up on film that concern me, I definitely want to express like my thoughts on this. So this one's going to surprise some people. And I want to preface this by saying that I'm not blaming Coach Z for the lack of talent at the position. I think that we can all acknowledge that this is not the most talented receiver room. And I'm not even really blaming him for the lack of production from the room. That is a roster construction issue that I think more so falls on the feet or at the hands of Omar Khan more than anything else. Okay, so just want to get that out there before like people come at me sideways in the comments. However, my biggest gripe right now is that this looks like a very, very poorly coached group on film. The same issues over and over and over, and not just over the course of this season and a small sample size of a month. It's the same issues that we've seen over the past several years. And for example, one of the things, guys can't get lined up correctly. So that is a very concerning thing for me. So I'll give you guys a little bit of an example, and you guys can go check out my Twitter for this video. But the Steelers are running what's called crunch, but you can just imagine they have Van Jefferson lined out wide towards the numbers, and they're asking him to go block the C gap defender. Van Jefferson has his outside foot up, okay, or his inside foot up, excuse me, and he has to travel all the way into the box to block a C gap defender. His split's way too wide. He's not able to get there. He basically pushes the defender in the back, and Najee Harris gets hit at the line of scrimmage. It's just a simple thing is like, and they ran it later in the game, and Jefferson lined up in the right spot. They condensed the split down, like he was able to get to where the guy that he was supposed to block. Those are good things. But like, it's not a 1 week issue. There are constant issues with that. I think the blocking effort and execution really across the board is really poor. I actually think that Calvin Austin is probably their most consistent blocker from an effort perspective. That's concerning when he's a guy that's 5'7", 160 something pounds. I think the execution is poor. Some of that can be related back to them asking guys like Van Jefferson to do things that he's not capable of doing. Van Jefferson's not a physical receiver. They're asking him to perform some of these blocks he's not capable of doing. I completely understand that, but the execution is not good enough. I'm still seeing multiple wide receivers in the same vicinity on route concepts. That indicates to me another example of lack of attention to detail. I thought that the Chargers game was Justin did some really fantastic things from the pocket, getting the ball out quickly and on time. But you go back and watch that game. There were multiple examples where Pickens and Calvin Austin end up within a couple feet of each other in their route combinations. There's no way that's by design. Like someone's not on the right page and someone's not running the right route. Another example, I think it was like right before the half. They're trying to set up like a last second field goal or whatever. They have Fields roll out to the right. Well, when Fields rolls out, it almost looks like he's expecting George Pickens to kind of come off earlier and break to the outside. But Pickens continues to carry his route really deep down the field. And by the time that happens, and Justin already has to throw the ball away. So like the spacing on that route combination looked really off to me. And I also think it's fair to point out, as great of a player as George Pickens is, and I really do, I can't stress this enough. Like, you will not be able to find a person on the internet, I feel like, that has been as high on George's talent that I have, really, since he was at Georgia. But the film is the film. Like, George is still kind of taking plays off and not running all of his routes at full speed. There is still a lack of effort on some plays throughout the game, and it's not a once a game type of thing. It's every week where there's multiple plays where you can point to and say, is 14 running 100% here? And I would say no. So I think that like all of those things, I think are things that like when he was hired, we expected him to bring this really tough mentality. I think there was a lot made about like early in training camp, him and George got into an argument over like some blocking effort and a drill. And everybody was like, oh, this is good to see. Like he's going to coach George really hard and we're going to get the best version of George Pickens. And again, George, even though he takes plays off, he's still a really good player, man. I'm not taking anything away from that. But what I personally, selfishly, as a huge fan of like his talent and some of the physical gifts that he has, I want to see him hit his potential. And I don't know that that's going to happen unless you get some of this other stuff cleaned up. The attention to detail, the effort, all that stuff. So that's just my opinion. I know some people would probably say that's a little bit of a small sample size and a big reaction for something over the first month. But I do want to talk about it just because I think that there's enough there that's concerning to me. So just want to kind of talk about just a couple questions that I had just overlaying to the mailbag stuff. One of which is there were several questions in here just about the wide receiver 2 thing. Should they trade for a guy? Obviously, Davante Adams has been in the headlines over the past 48 hours or so. So people are asking me, like, should the Steelers trade for Davante Adams? Look, The answer is yes, it's Devontae Adams. Like, come on now. Like, I don't think you guys necessarily need me to tell you this, but just out of curiosity, because I couldn't help myself, I went back and watched a couple games of Devontae Adams from earlier this year. Still very, very good. 31 years old, so he is getting up there in age. Obviously, his cap hit for this season isn't necessarily bad. It's something that the Steelers could definitely take in. The acquiring team, Adams has basically two non-guaranteed years left on his contract that have like a 35.6, I think, or $36.25 million cap hit. It sounds like that all parties involved understand that something has to happen with his contract in order for him to get moved, whether that's like him agreeing to some sort of like slight pay cut. Maybe you get more guaranteed money, but it brings like the AAV down. Or, it's also possible that whoever trades for him might just understand that this could be a rental, where, it's just a 1 year thing. So that's obviously but it also plays into like what he's going to cost to acquire. Like, this isn't going to be an Ayuk situation where you're going to, like, I don't even think he's going to command that type of draft capital. So Adams is a fantastic player. I could gush about him all day long. I actually have like a couple funny tweets that you can go find on my Twitter about like me begging the Steelers to draft Adams in 2014. So I've long admired his play. They desperately need another guy that can get open. So I think that that's really an obvious thing. You guys don't really need to tell me that the wide receiver two production has been bad. Van Jefferson ranks 113th out of 120 qualifying receivers in yards per route run right now. It's not good enough. Like, we know that. And again, like, that's not necessarily all on the player either. I tweeted this out, but Van Jefferson was brought here as a wide receiver four type who was competing to make the roster. Like, he's being miscast as a wide receiver two starting outside receiver right now, and being asked to do things that he can't do. But with Adams, like, it would give you another outside receiver. Adams is also very, very good at understanding like where to find holes in zone coverage, which the Steelers are, seeing a lot of, especially cover three. He's very good out on the slot. He wins on the perimeter, late hands, like body control, can do a lot of the things vertically that Pickens can do. Obviously, a little bit different of an athlete, especially at this stage of his career, but still a very, very good player. I think that the Jets are probably the favorite to get him. But my biggest thing, and I think a lot of people that I see that are like anti Devontae Adams right now on Twitter, to me, it just doesn't really make sense, because I would not be dumb enough to sit here and say, like, if they traded a day two, like a third rounder or something like that, or a third and some change for Adams, like, Adams doesn't necessarily make the Steelers a Super Bowl contender. But he does several things. One, he provides your offense competence, and the goal should be improving the team more than anything else. But two, it would also give you a better chance at evaluating Justin Fields. Like, to me, like, one of the bigger stories of the season, now that we've got competent play over the first month of the season and we've gotten glimpses of what Justin can do, it's about surrounding him and continuing to evaluate him over the course of the season. And I think providing him with another high caliber wide receiver, it would be awesome, man. Like, you have multiple guys who can win one-on-ones on the outside when teams want to stack the box and play a deep safety in the middle of the field. Yeah, it'll take pressure off George Pickens. Like, yes, it's a no-brainer for me. Now, does Devontae want to come here? I don't know. I mean, it seems like reports say that he would. I'm sure that he would probably prefer to go somewhere where with a quarterback he's played with before. I don't know. It seems like he is open to other possibilities as well. So for me, it's a no-brainer. I just think that it matches up with the timeline of the rest of the team. Cam Hayward's 35. TJ Watt turns 30 in a couple days. Like, this is a defense that is getting older. And even if you're not going to necessarily put yourself in a Super Bowl or bust window or anything like that, I would like to win a playoff game. They haven't won a playoff game since 2016. I would like to continually improve the team, especially at a major weakness, and adding a Hall of Fame, what I would consider a Hall of Fame caliber player. So, the details on how that stuff shakes out, I don't know, but would I be for it? Absolutely. Just kind of got two more questions here. Next, should the Steelers break their in-season contract rule for Justin Fields, and what would a potential deal look like? So this is something that I kind of hinted at a little bit in the mailbag, but I want to kind of fully expand on this. I don't think that the Steelers should or will break their in-season negotiating rule for Justin Fields. And to me, that's okay. Like, I think that a lot of people, I've seen like Mike Florio and people talk about, well, it's only going to cost them money in the long run. True. I mean, for me, I constantly talk about like extending players early, like teams that, for example, offer their first round picks extensions after 3 years are constantly like they're ahead of the game, like not waiting until the very last moment to pay your best players. That stuff saves you money. That's what good front offices do. I have been really encouraged by what I've seen from Justin Fields. I want to see a larger sample size, not just of consistent play from him, but I want to see how the offense looks around him. How are you going to construct this thing? Because I'm pretty sure that Arthur Smith is going to be here next year, and he's going to be here probably for the foreseeable future. So we kind of need to see like a larger sample size rather than a month or 6 games or whatever we're talking about here before we get into like, hey, we're going to commit significant money to this guy. As far as like a potential deal or like what it would even look like, dude, I have no clue. I really don't. The best guess is anybody's guess, I guess. I don't know what it would necessarily cost. I don't particularly worry too much about that until the time comes. And that's just kind of where I'm at with it. I haven't thought about it very much, even as I was putting the show notes together, just because I really don't think that that element of things matters too much right now. We get in closer to the off season and Justin continues to play that he is, then I can think we can find some comparable contracts around the league to the level that he's playing at and where the roster is and where they want to go. And is it good enough moving forward to put the Steelers in position to continually compete in the AFC? We could talk about those things at the requisite time. I just don't know that now is the right time to do those things. Just my personal opinion. And then just kind of last one, what are your thoughts on the secondary? It seems like Porter is off to a slow start, and why is Minka Fitzpatrick not making more splash plays? So Joey, it's a little bit different for him. I know the Indy game has like, been a little bit tough because, he was all over the screen in that one. Gave up some catches. I think even some of those catches, though, like he was in good position. He just lost at the catch point, which I don't think is necessarily like a theme on his film. If you really look at it over his rookie season, even dating back to college, he's usually pretty good in that regard. One thing I will note is that the Steelers do seem to be playing more off coverage, more zone coverage this year. So he's playing a lot more like outside and in bail technique. I would say that if you're looking at like room for improvement for Joey, it's just urgency and understanding of routes in zone coverage. And I think that you even saw that maybe on like the first play of the game a little bit where Richardson was able to throw that ball like right over his outstretched arms. I think if Joey is just a little bit quicker to, recognize that and understand and feel that crosser coming over the middle of the field, he'd be able to put himself in a little bit more of better of position. Maybe he's able to secure that pick. He dropped the interception in the end zone, but it was good to see him, recognize that the route concept was coming in his direction. So there's a lot of good things that I want to acknowledge there. I still think that Joey is going to be a very good player for the Steelers defense. My panic level on Joey is at about a 0, to be honest with you. It's just not. So I would like to see him tackle at a more consistent rate as well. But, the penalties and stuff like that I think have a lot of other people worried. They just don't worry me as much just because I think that having a guy who can play man coverage, can follow the opposing team's best receiver, and win a lot of those matchups and hold his own one-on-one, I think it's incredibly valuable, even if there are deficiencies in his game that, and maybe the over grabbiness and all that stuff always is there. I don't know, but I'm just not overly concerned about it. I think he's still going to be fine. So in terms of Mika not making splash plays, I mentioned, the Steelers have gotten him back to playing in the post in the center field area of the field for, almost exclusively so far this season. Teams are pretty much avoiding him. I thought that I went over this in the film room for the members earlier. I think it was yesterday, or the day before, whatever. He did have a chance, I think, to like break on that ball that Flacco threw in his direction in the second half. I think that that's one that he probably usually at least gets a hand on. But he's made some good plays in terms of like buzzing down and stopping guys short of the sticks. He's been an incredibly reliable tackler. We talked about Elliott earlier, not missing a tackle so far this season. Minka hasn't missed one either. It's not like the opposing teams. I know they allowed some explosive plays against the Colts, but it's not like it's just bombs away on the Steelers secondary right now, and teams are just throwing the ball down the field. It's not what it's been over the first month of the season. I think a lot of like turnover production in general, especially for safeties, some of it's luck, man. And that's the unfortunate part of it. You can't really explain it, but sometimes the ball just doesn't find you, and it just hasn't like found him yet. But I still think that he's done some really good things as a run defender, as a tackler. And I'm not really worried about like the quote unquote lack of production. Although I do acknowledge that I would like to see Minka start getting interceptions again and, take a step back to the house. I think that's, one of the things that I think makes him special. But again, my concern level over Minka Maybe if Joey Porter's like a 1, I would say Minka's a 0. So that's just my thoughts on that. Um, but again, I know this is lengthy. I was trying to get this done in like 30 minutes, but as usual, kind of went a little bit longer. But please let me know like your thoughts just on the style of this video. Is this something that you guys want me to do more often? Like, could we do this again, maybe at the mid-season mark of the season, maybe after week 9 or sometime around like the bye week or something like that, just to recap, kind of where we're at. Because I know like just the schedule that I try to adhere to, we usually try to do like 1 or 2 film rooms a week, and then we do the previews and the recast. But I don't really have the chance. I don't really usually get on here a ton to do just like broader type discussions about the team. And if this is something that you guys find value in, then I definitely want to do that to try to keep the content fresh. So, just on your way out, thank you guys so much for the support. Thank you guys for listening. Please make sure that you like the video, subscribe to the channel, all that good stuff. And just as a reminder, like if you are interested, like you want even more content from me, obviously you can find all my written work at SteelersNow.com. But also consider becoming a member to the channel. The link is in the description. There's a lot of cool stuff. I do a lot of like deep dive stuff over there. Like I said, this week we took a look at the defensive performance against the Colts, some of the issues we dive into, some of the tendencies, just different things like that. I also do some long form kind of quarterback breakdowns over there, and continuing to add to the library of content that's available. So if you guys are interested in that, it's the cost of a small coffee a month. So definitely check that out. And then as always, please make sure that you check out our channel sponsor, Homage. That link is going to be in the description as well. I can't say anything right now, but they sent me a email yesterday with some of the products that they are rolling out over the month of October. Fire. Like there's a couple things I'm like absolutely grabbing as soon as they're released, and maybe we'll do a giveaway or something like that too. But they've already got a lot of new stuff on there. Like I think I said in the recap, I was walking around Indianapolis with my Amish stuff on, and got a ton of compliments about like, hey, where'd you get that shirt, this and that. So if you guys are wanting some new Steelers gear for the season, especially as we get into a season change here, we're getting closer to fall. Definitely check that out. But as always, I really appreciate you guys, and I will see you guys soon. Peace and love.